Okay, so I am back in Portland, Maine, after what a couple of weeks of traveling. Yeah, so back in the quiet space of my home here in Portland, Maine, after a week of being in the Aardvark studios with Sam Rocha and the trio, recording the album Late to Love. Feels good to be back in Maine. So where we left off yesterday was the fragment that I actually made it into a fragment. It's an end of a quotation from Heidegger, where he says, hermeneutics is destruction. And I was using that, I went back to that phrase to talk about the way in which the poetic saying of the sage, right, interrupts, erupts, disrupts the ordinary. Right? So this is what we're doing in this chapter, and what these what became this chapter, but these meditations have been focusing on, is the story of Heraclitus, recounted by Aristotle, originally told by Aristotle, and then retold by Heidegger. And it's all about how the extraordinary appears in the ordinary. And this, to me, is an exemplary way of talking about the way learning gets underway, in the way that I'm talking about learning in this very existential way. So the relationship between being and learning happens, or begins, or is initiated through a kind of interruption. It is an interruption. It's an interruption of everyday life. Thinking / learning happens as is an interruption to the ordinary flow of things. So it's the bursting through of the extraordinary into the ordinary. Heraclitus' fragments are an exemplary of the wisdom poetry. We find in them many examples of sayings that point to the ineffable and call attention to the beckoning that is conveyed in the appeal of language. If the essence of poetic saying is to deliver the beckoning of that which appeals to language, then the poetic saying must convey this appeal without drawing attention to the saying itself. The poetic must bear a message, and this bearing must be a pointing, a relaying of the appeal that is heard by the sage. What is crucial is the hearing, the authentic listening, and the emphasis is placed on this event of hearing as the primordial gathering of meaning. Thus, the dwelling of the sage, the modality of learning, is first and foremost an intense listening, or what we have called attunement. Poetic saying takes up the challenge of speaking in a manner that conjures up the modality of reception, of authentic listening, by always attending to that which is beyond its own conveying. This is the essence of the poetics of learning that is identified most intensely in myth, parable, and allegory. Learning is poetic because it is located in the discovery and creation of the not yet, an ongoing response to what is beyond the immediate. Learning is essentially hermeneutics, as an interpretive process that involves a kind of dismantling, breaking, or destruction, both as a dismantling, breaking free, and as in releasement from the immediate, and a constructive breaking ground, as in the cultivation of new meanings that will in turn be deconstructive. The saying of the sage is identified as wisdom poetry because it is primarily a relaying or a bearing of a message. When Heidegger says, language beckons us, he is calling attention to the poetic nature of language. To say language beckons us is to say language invites us to think, to make meaning, to hear and respond. We are beckoned to learn by language. This is the poetics of learning. When we are learning, we are responding to the poetic appeal of language. In Heraclitus, the appeal or beckoning, the hearing, and the responding are all gathered together or unified by the poetic force of language. We identify the twofold play in this gathering, for the gathering gathers listening and speaking together in the directing of hearing and speaking. Heraclitus names this gathering Logos. As we discussed in the opening section of the work, the Heraclitean Logos is a proper name for being's processual unfolding. Logos names the unfolding of the twofold play of concealment appearance. Language's beckoning bears the news of this unfolding. And the poetic saying of the sage conveys this unfolding. To convey is to, quote, carry, bring or take from one place to another, transport or bear, as in lead or conduct, as a channel or medium, transmit, and thereby to communicate, impart, or make known. But in a more archaic usage, to convey is to steal, purloin, to take away secretly. The poetic saying of the sage is thus akin to the Promethean delivery of fire, of wisdom. It is a transportation of the unforeseen that involves something of a secretive imparting. This is the conjuring character of evocative speech, which has the effect of transporting or guiding into the mysterious. I like that. Yesterday in my post-reading commentary that when I post on the blog, I was reminded of the link between fire for Heraclitus, the sort of most important symbol, but it's not just a symbol. It's somewhere in between being a symbol and an actual manifestation of Logos, right? So he's still part of the pre-Socratic thinking, where they're sort of reducing things to a singular material phenomena. So air, or water, fire, earth, sort of four fundamental elements. For Heraclitus, it's fire. But I recalled though in my post reading commentary that it's fire that kind of emancipates us, right? That sets us apart. Insofar as we're talking about being able to, do something, right? So our freedom, in a way, is disclosed or shown to us through our relationship with fire. Fire, because of fire we can stay warm, we can organize our lives, we can stay warm, we can cook. I mean, fire is absolutely essential. And in this way, it emancipates us because it gives us a sort of consistency that we can then base our organizer. So if we have a consistent, something consistent, right? Place to sleep, warmth, a way to make food, that's the consistent center. From that, we can branch out and explore. So it's sort of, we need that center from which we can move around or move out from, and then to return. So all that being said, though, in my post-reading commentary, I wrote about Prometheus, right? So Prometheus offers the gift. He steals the fire from Olympus, from the gods, and he brings it down and he gives it to humans because they were incomplete. So in a way, it creates some kind of complexity. The offering of the fire, the gift of fire to the humans, is what sets them apart once they have that from the gods. But that sort of complicates things because in the consistent sense of this story, Heraclitus says, when he's warming his hands by the fire, here too the gods are coming to presence. So there isn't a break. And I think this is important for Heidegger, and I would take this too, that it's no surprise that for Marx, the young Karl Marx, Prometheus was a kind of hero figure, because it kind of symbolizes the break with the gods of the ideology of religion. But I think that I'd like to think of the continuity between the earth, the gods, and the humans. So I'm going to leave it at that so it doesn't get timed out by Google. This day, May the 10th, 2014.